Hi, I'm Rob. I'm the president of the Always Elvis fan club. Today I'm joined with a co-host, Bruno, who will be joining us because we're here to talk with Jonathan Redmond. He is the editor and executive producer of EPiC, Elvis Presley in Concert, that many of you have saw, I'm sure. Jonathan, welcome to what we call Studio E.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Jonathan, we touched base a little bit in Memphis, and I know you've had a busy schedule, so we appreciate you taking the time here. One of the thoughts I had was let some people see the movie, and then in this discussion, maybe they can relate to some of the things that they saw and things that you might have done on the editing side of things. But before we start with that, can you tell us a little bit of your background of how you became an editor and how you began working with Baz eventually?
Sure, yeah. I'm Irish to begin with. I grew up in Ireland, and I got into editing in Ireland kind of many years ago. Kind of slipped into it, kind of slightly unconventional, sideways manner. I always had a background in photography, but a really talented editor I knew, a guy called Brian McHugh, was an editor doing a lot of music-based stuff for U2 and stuff like that. And he had a project coming up, and he needed an assistant editor. And he asked me if I'd have any interest. I didn't know a lot about editing at the time, but I thought, oh, give it a go. It was actually a Neil Young concert he was working on, which has never been released actually.
Oh, wow.
And just got into it, and I never stopped. I just loved it.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing the editing aspect of your career?
A good 30 years, in various different kind of manners. Kind of started off as an assistant editor, then became an editor. Um, and then I met Baz Luhrmann, and obviously his background is in big feature films. So I kind of took a step backwards to kind of get that experience. I became an assistant editor again,
Hmm.
and that was on Moulin Rouge. So it was back in around 2000 when I met kind of Baz for
Hmm.
the first time.
We
That was
watched uh, we
yeah,
watched your
that was
Moulin Rouge the other night because the
oh cool.
the live stage show has come through Edmonton already. So we went and saw the on stage performance, and we wanted to see we've seen the movie, then we saw the stage, and then we wanted to see the movie again to see how close they were. So
Yeah, some really cool music choices
yes,
in the stage show. I'm sure it's probably changed again since I
yeah,
saw it a couple of years ago, but I thought the guys did an amazing job
yeah, it was
on the
excellent.
stage show.
Hmm.
It's a lot of fun.
So how was, even before EPiC, working on the Elvis thing? Was it different than some of your other projects? Was it unique in any fashion?
All Baz projects start with a deep dive into all things research, and the
Okay.
great thing about kind of a topic like Elvis Presley is there's so much material out there, from the books to the films to the documentaries. So that was a very kind of immersive experience back then. But working on the film, I guess it probably was different in a way, because obviously making a movie about a real person, Elvis Presley, and we had to be very faithful to his story, and what we knew of him as a person. So yeah, it was probably a slightly different experience. But it was around that time when we were doing that kind of deep dive into the research that we came across all this footage that we ended up using to make EPiC.
Did you get to go into the vaults, or was there a team that just kind of brought the video up to you guys to review, or were you in there searching with them?
No, Warner Brothers kind of had their team kind of go in there and transported all the film footage back to Los Angeles, where we had a film assistant kind of go through it and kind of sort it out, and then it all got scanned. So I never had the pleasure of going to the salt mines in Kansas myself,
Mm.
but yeah, we had the Warner Brothers team kind of going there multiple times, pulling stuff out.
Did you see any of the unmastered footage before Peter Jackson got his hand on it, or was that already done?
No, absolutely, I did. Yeah, it's what I was using kind of most of the time. Over the last 8 years, I had the unmastered footage. So the only footage that we kind of put through Peter Jackson's process in his company Wingnut was the finished film. So that went through the restoration process. That process is quite time consuming and expensive. So you wouldn't do it to the full 59 hours worth of kind of raw scans that we had.
Yeah, that was kind of one of our questions. Did you remaster it all and then put a movie together, or pick what you needed, obviously based on cost? So.
Yeah, well, there's different. You could say, well, what is remastering? Remastering could be, kind of scanning the footage at the latest technology. The great thing about film is it scales very, very well. When this footage was first kind of transferred to video, it was probably standard definition back in the 80s, and then in the 90s, HD came along. Now it's all 4K. So the great thing about film is it scales to kind of whatever the current technology is.
I was going to say, when you look at the unmastered footage side by side with the finished project, way different?
Not way different, because when we pull the film out of the archives, we had it scanned at 4K, and as I said, film scales very well, so the film did look fantastic, kind of as is. But Peter Jackson's process is like the icing on the cake. We're coming from a good place, and we made it kind of just that much more beautiful. It removed any dust. Film gathers dust, and when you scan film, you get the dust. Hairs and gates. That old expression. Check the gate for hairs. There's hairs, and kind of there was an element of grain reduction as well that Peter's company did to make the film a little less grainy, while still feeling like film, I should say. We didn't want this to feel like it could have been shot on an iPhone with no kind of filmic feel. We wanted to retain that. So it just adds a bit of gloss, a little bit of sharpness, and you've seen the results.
Well, it definitely came through. It definitely came through. It was fantastic.
After all those years, for it to be there and in the condition that it was, that you could actually do something with it, restore it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, that's the great thing about film, is if it's looked after well and stored correctly, which it has been, it can last for a long time. It does degrade though over time. So I'm glad we scanned it all. Because film does deteriorate.
Yeah. Well, as I'm sure you're aware in all your discussions with Elvis fans, that they've been starving for just about anything. And, I saw 10 seconds of Elvis doing Fool Such As I in your clip. I was like, I seen it, and then it's gone. And I was like, why only 10 seconds? But, I understand there's a lot you want to present, and that was one that caught my eye that went by quick.
Indeed. Yeah, I had what I call the MGM mysteries. A lot of that rehearsal footage that you're referring to, including Fool Such As I, was filmed at MGM Studios here in Los Angeles while Elvis was rehearsing for That's the Way It Is. I have a lot of footage, and I can never work out kind of why they only filmed portions of songs. And in some cases, one of my personal favorites, there's only like 15 seconds worth of the song, and the camera either got turned off or they cut it out, and it's sitting in someone's garage somewhere. I don't know. That's why I call it the MGM mysteries. Yeah, but there probably was a little bit more than A Fool Such As I that remains to be seen. But it wasn't a full song, I guarantee.
Yeah. Bruno and I kind of delve into video creation as a hobby. Bruno's probably a little bit more experienced, I guess, in that realm. So something like this, like we use Final Cut Pro in our adventures of trying to make some videos, and in something like this, or you as an editor, are you diverse in all those different platforms of editing software, or do you have a preference, or how would it work, and specifically with this EPiC movie?
That's a good question. I did use Final Cut Pro myself for quite a few years. The old version, not the new one. Before that, I kind of got trained on a system called Lightworks, which is still around to a certain extent, but not many professionals use it. But I primarily use Avid now myself, and indeed I cut EPiC on Avid. It's a very kind of robust professional system which works nicely with my music team, music editors, and it's kind of, you know, the default really kind of editing platform for major film studios. Some of the other Adobe Premiere is also very, very popular, particularly with editors that maybe use Final Cut, the old version of Final Cut. A lot of those people have moved over to Premiere, and a lot of feature films are cut on nowadays. But yeah, I really like Avid myself.
So as a part of the video editing and working with the sound editors, do you do some sound editing as well? Have you played in that realm as well, or you leave that up to the people that you're working with?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I mean, when you're kind of cutting a film, you know, you're obviously cutting music and adding sound effects if needs be, and stuff like that. So I do a lot of that myself. But I'm also a firm believer in, you know, kind of music editors are much better at music editing than I am. Just like a colorist, you know, kind of I love people doing what they do best.
And doing a story like this where you don't have a script, so you're not saying, okay, we need this theme music to follow the story. You're using Elvis's music, and I'll lean towards Polk Salad Annie, because to me that 4 or 5 minutes of Polk Salad Annie is Oscar worthy, just based on the editing that you guys did. Because the true Elvis fan, probably not the people who are just getting into it now, but as we watch it, we're going, okay, there's 3 video performances in there, because you can tell by the suits that Elvis is wearing. Then you're cutting over to
more than 3, like.
Yeah, and then you're cutting into the rehearsal, and to the ear, it was so seamless. So my question is, were you editing to a soundtrack? Was that one audio track and then you put in the visual? I was just kind of curious how Polk Salad came together.
Yeah, no, I these multiple different versions of the performance, from the rehearsals through to the stage shows, and yeah, it was one of the first things I did, actually, and I did it years ago as a shorter version of the sequence that's in the film. I did it as kind of a proof of concept when we were trying to get financiers interested in making this film, which was more difficult than you'd think. But you know, instead of, you know, Baz is going, hey, I want to make an Elvis film, Baz always kind of puts together something to show financiers and kind of go, hey, it could be like this. You know, this is kind of cool. And so I cut together kind of, it was like a 12-minute sequence, and part of that was Polk Salad Annie, a mashup between the rehearsals and stage performances, just to show kind of people that, you know, hey, this could be really something different. We're not just kind of, you know, sprinkling a bit of Baz fairy dust on the old films. We're trying to do something different. So yeah, I started working with the multiple different performances and kind of picked the favorite bits and kind of built up this sequence, which I think played quite well. And you know, I loved the energy he had the performances, in the rehearsals, I should say. And it was really, I think, fascinating to us making it. Kind of go, he wasn't just kind of going through the motions in the rehearsals. He was giving it everything, and that was just really infectious. And we wanted to kind of build that into the sequence. But to answer your question, was I working to a cut soundtrack that maybe my music editors gave me? No, I wasn't. So I built it up. Elvis, as you know, famously kind of would control his band and change tempo in the middle of a song. And Polka Salad Annie in particular, the tempo was always different. So that was a real challenge. And what I did kind of felt a lot more jarring than compared to what it ended up. So we had this amazing team of music editors, but the one guy who did Polka Salad Annie, a guy called Jameson Shaw, kind of really got it, and he was able to kind of massage the tempo in the transitions, to go from what Elvis was actually doing and then kind of segue tempo wise, and he kind of smoothed the whole thing out. But if you watch my original kind of rough cut, it's essentially the same picture with the same sound, but all the transitions have been kind of smoothed out and massaged. And yeah, there's I've been working with these music guys for many years now, and it's a real case of kind of 1 + 1 = 3. I do something, I give to them, they make it better. Sometimes they suggest, well, if this would be more musically correct if you add another couple of seconds to this, and then I do that and send it back, and there's a lot of back and forth between me and my music team.
So earlier you mentioned, it was quite different working with this because you're not working with a traditional script, right? So you had to delve into the story of Elvis Presley. So I would assume that there's some kind of outline and picking up key moments and events that you either tie with music or music tie, you find video to match the image. One of the things that, as subtle as it was, that came through in Polka Salad Annie is in part of the song, it talks about sharecroppers and poor families, and the picture of young Elvis with his mom and dad come into play. So, where does that come from? Does that come from something that you saw and say, hey, Baz, can we do this? Or is it something that Baz saw? How does the process work between the two of your brains?
Well, I think, kind of, we were always kind of very interested in the fact that, kind of, there always seemed to be a fair amount of kind of Greek chorusing going on with the music. I was talking about, I really want to go overseas. I've never been to England. I want to go to Japan. And then, we used, I've never been to Spain, to kind of, add weight to what he just said. And then listening to the lyrics in Polka Salad Annie, they didn't have much, but they did all right. It really kind of felt very poignant to myself and Baz that kind of having known Elvis' story, they came from a dirt poor background, the poorest people in their neighborhood, and yet they did all right, and they certainly did all right in the end. So it just felt, it felt quite emotional to myself and Baz. I can't remember exactly who came up with the idea of putting something there, but and we didn't know what it was going to be, and we were looking for the perfect shot that maybe hadn't been seen before, and we had a couple of ideas and we were trying to track something down, but that didn't come to pass. So we ended up going with, it's a very well-known, very well-loved picture of his family, of very young Elvis. So we used that, and it kind of, we thought it worked well. So yeah, we went with that.
Was there a lot of give and take in this creation?
Generally speaking, I think we were on the same page most of the time. It was a really kind of quite lovely experience, to be honest, making this film. And Baz often speaks about how it's been one of his most pleasant projects that he's ever worked on. And I think part of that is the fact that, kind of Baz very often he's the writer, producer, director. He has to write the project, then he has to shoot it and direct that, and that's a very physical toll. And then the editorial process is constantly about kind of rewriting the performances he's already shot. Now with this project, because we couldn't, there was an element of, oh, wouldn't it be great if, I wish we had Elvis saying this, and it was very much, well, we don't, so we have to make do with what we've got. I think at the very beginning of the process, working with Baz, there's an element of, usually on feature film, we can go, oh, we want our actor to say this instead of what he actually said. And that's no problem on a feature film. You just get the actor to revoice the lines and, put the camera on the back of his head and, you're fine. Now in this project, of course, because, Elvis is no longer with us, we couldn't, kind of make stuff up. We weren't using AI. We didn't want to, kind of fake anything. So to a certain extent, kind of once we got over that, there was certain freedom in kind of going, well, we have to make this out of what we've got. And that after that, it became a very enjoyable experience.
From what I've heard in a couple of Baz interviews, it's like the movie was going to go this way. Then you guys found the 45 minutes of audio, and that changed the trajectory of the project. What was it going to look like before if you didn't find that 45 minutes?
Well, finding that 45-minute definitely kind of unlocks the key to, became very clear to us what we were going to do after that. But before that, we've been talking about this for years. We knew we had all this footage. We didn't know exactly what it was because none of it was sunk up to audio. So, we just knew there was 59 hours worth of Elvis singing on stage and dancing around, and but we didn't know what performances there were. But we knew there was a lot there, and we were confident that it deserved its own project. At one point, I've always been fascinated by, obviously Elvis has a huge fan base. He was one of the most famous people in the world for so long, and he changed culture. But I've always been fascinated by the fact that, kind of within Elvis's fan base are people who have huge fan bases of their own, who've also had a big impact on culture. People like Bruce Springsteen, Bono, and you name it. I had a long list of contemporary artists who claim to have been impacted or influenced by Elvis Presley over the years. So at one point we were exploring kind of, wouldn't it be cool to have Elvis singing with other artists and, kind of do duets and God knows what. We never really flushed out that idea. But yeah, we found this interview with Elvis and we thought, well, even though Elvis isn't telling us anything that, if you've read the books or seen the documentaries, you know his story, and he's not really shedding that much light. But hearing Elvis say it in his own voice felt very new to us, and it really kind of felt quite special. So when we came across this interview, then it became a bit of a no-brainer, have Elvis sing and tell his story himself.
To me, there's sort of three categories of fans. There's the people like myself, right? So I was a teenager in the 70s, right? So I was a fan and I knew everything and anything. Then you have people who just like the music and just listen to the music as another artist. So there's this whole new generation. And to us old fans, it's shocking to hear someone say, well, I've never heard an Elvis song before. So, this movie's kind of, you guys are able to attack you're giving the old generation what they've been starving for, and you're creating new fans.
That was very much our intention. We very much, and I may have said this to you, Rob, in Graceland, but we very much set out to make something for everybody. Something that would appeal to, the existing Elvis fan base, people like yourself, people who maybe found Elvis through the Elvis film a few years ago. And then we also wanted to make it for people who didn't know much about, or maybe didn't think much of Elvis.
Yeah.
God forbid there are people out there who are like that, but we want to change people's minds. People who maybe thought about, when they think of Elvis, they just think of a big old guy in a jumpsuit. The cartoon version of Elvis, and we want to show, well, Elvis was a force of nature. He wasn't always like that, and kind of watch this, and hopefully it'll change your mind. So it was a difficult needle to thread to appeal to all those people, and I know some Elvis fans don't like our film because it doesn't play entire songs all the way through, and jumps around too much and all the rest. But and I'm glad that I think a lot of Elvis fans are just happy to see the big man on the big screen again, and see him like they've never seen him before, and hear him like they've never heard him before.
Us traditional Elvis fans, we're always looking for something new that we haven't seen before, and I think at this point we've seen it all, right? So now when you go to YouTube, you see people taking what they have and trying to change it into something else just to make it a different way of viewing Elvis. That's why your film is so endearing to us. I myself, I take Elvis from 1956 singing "Don't Be Cruel" with him in '68 and did a mashup of the two side by side, because I'm just trying to think as a fan, what else can we show the people, because they're looking for something new. But you guys have probably set the next 10, 15 years of what we can look forward to based on this movie.
Unfortunately, there's lots of calls going, just release the footage and put it all out there. Now, you can't do that. People own this footage. Multiple people own this footage, and the music rights alone. I mean, it's I think one of the reasons why no one's tackled this project until now is it's just so complicated. You could have 5 different rights owners, and you have to get them all to sign off and agree to a figure, which doesn't make it too expensive to make.
Mm-hmm.
So if for that reason, you can't just put it out on DVD and hopefully people will buy it. You have to try and create something in hopefully an entertaining way that'll appeal to as many people as possible, to justify how much it costs to make such a project.
But now, Jonathan, that there's a few weeks in, yourself and the team, did you feel that you accomplished what you were trying to accomplish, or is there more you're looking forward to do with this, as the movie goes forward in other platforms, I assume?
I think we're delighted at the reception so far. I mean, it's been overwhelming, just from the kind words that you guys have said, and so many other people have said online. The critical reaction has been amazing. I mean, me myself, every time I see it, and indeed I took my 6-year-old son to see it over the weekend. Every time I see it, I just kind of write myself a list of mental notes going, "Oh, you could have done better here," and I hadn't seen it in 10 days or so, and every time I see it, I see 100 things that I'd like to change and I'd like to make better, but Baz always says you never finish a film; it just gets taken away when you run out of time or money, and that's very true. But moving forward, I think I believe this film could be going back into IMAX for a few more runs, which would be exciting. And I'm not too sure where this film is going to live in terms of on a streaming platform, but it will go there. And of course, we will do a physical release, a 4K Blu-ray.
Right.
Yeah, we were kind of wondering why the IMAX. So, like in my area, it was only in IMAX for like 1 week, so a very short period of time. How come so short? Is that just the way IMAX works, or?
I know IMAX wanted an exclusive week, which they got, which was the first week. And then I'm not too sure if they had other films booked in around that time. I know there was a number of big releases that came out. Scream could have been, kind of booked in for IMAX. I'm not too sure what it was. But yeah, I got an email this morning going, this is the biggest documentary release that IMAX ever had.
Because I know you told me, you said, Rob, whatever you do, go see it in IMAX. And that's what I've been trying to relay to all our viewers and people in our group. It's great either way, but visually and sound wise in an IMAX theater, it's just next level, right?
It is next level. I must say, I was a little underwhelmed when I saw it last weekend in a regular theater. They turned the sound down, and this film needs to be heard loud. So I was a little disappointed by that. I didn't complain because I was with my 6-year-old son. I didn't want to burn his ears too much, but yeah, it should be played loud. I mean, we mixed it to play at a good level, called reference, and unfortunately, some theaters just turn it down.
When you're editing the movie, knowing that is it two different cuts, one for IMAX and one for standard theater? Is there anything special that you have to do knowing that you're going to show this in IMAX?
Not especially, Bruno. Kind of we did have some kind of reframing considerations that we had to make for IMAX. It was just a process, really. Kind of, we didn't blow anything up or didn't do anything like that, especially for IMAX. So that was an option for us, and we decided not to do that. We wanted to respect the original aspect ratios of the original film. So, for example, Elvis on Tour, 16mm footage, it has a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is perfect for IMAX. And the 35mm stuff, which is the widescreen stuff, not so much. So we had a choice of, do you want to crop it or not? And we absolutely did not want to crop it. We want to kind of respect the original aspect ratios. So that was just a kind of technical process that we had to go through for the IMAX release. And then there's a separate mix because IMAX have their own speakers. Instead of the 0.1, there's no subwoofer because every speaker has a subwoofer in IMAX. So it's a different mix process. But in terms of the cut, it's the same film.
You're saying it's the audio's different, but visually you're seeing everything like you would in a standard theater.
Yeah, and the audio is the same, but you mix it slightly differently.
I see.
So it's a secondary process.
Great information. So you told us after you guys did the Austin Butler Elvis movie, and then you found this footage, and you had you were going to go forward with a movie. Who came up with EPiC? The name EPiC or Elvis Presley in Concert? Like, did somebody say that's epic? I mean, it's awesome.
That was me, actually.
Awesome.
Came about by accident. It was a funny little story, actually. I was with Baz and one of his producers, Skylar, and we're kind of coming up with a name for a text thread, just that we could put on our phone so we could all communicate, and and we were kind of EPFC, EPC, and I went, can we just add an I in there so it's EPIC, EPiC, and everyone went, that sounds pretty cool. So it kind of stuck, and that was a working title for a long time. And then when it came to coming up with a name for the film, we thought, well, why not just call it EPiC?
It's funny, for 50 years, since Elvis has been gone, everybody talks about Elvis Presley in concert. It would have been nice if you could have seen Elvis Presley in concert. Not once did I ever put the term EPiC together. So hats off to you on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Kudos.
It's just a happy accident.
Yeah.
Happy accident. And then on a marketing standpoint as well, it's not like, what is EPiC? Everybody knows what EPiC is. So Jonathan, that was a real good one.
No, thank you.
this is a question or a comment from my wife that tickled her a little bit. Is the whole when as Elvis fans, there's this sort of love-hate relationship with the Colonel. Without the Colonel, there might not be an Elvis, but at the same time, the Colonel held Elvis back a little bit in the opinions of the fans. Devil in Disguise, when you're doing that whole sequence on the Colonel, whose idea was that song? Because that was, I think, perfect. You're just kind of playing with the idea that maybe the Colonel wasn't the greatest for Elvis. Is that kind of where that came from?
Yeah, very much. I think I put that song in there. It's meant to be, it's meant to be just a bit cheeky, a little
Tongue in
bit,
cheek.
tongue in cheek, kind of. I didn't want this film to be about Colonel. This isn't a warts and all Elvis Presley deep dive into all aspects of his life and career and all the rest. It was meant to be a very joyous, celebration using cool music. And I love that song, Devil in Disguise. I thought, well, it kind of suits, this tongue-in-cheek kind of Colonel moment kind of perfectly. Especially when I was talking about, I don't know who sold I Hate Elvis buttons, and the interviewer says, "Oh, it's the same person that sells I Like buttons." Yeah.
So that footage of the Colonel, where did that come from?
The color footage.
Well, him at the beginning of he's on. It looks like he was on a ship or something when he was kind of sticking out his tongue, and yeah.
That came from Graceland actually. It's the same body of footage that the gold suit footage came from. It was on one of the trips. Elvis and the Colonel and his team kind of famously took a boat to Hawaii back in '56, and it's from that body of 8mm footage, and it came from the Graceland archives.
Mentioned about full-length footage of Hampton Roads, or a majority of that concert. Was that the same case in Las Vegas at the International? Is that kind of the same thing, or is that more parsed up and split?
The Vegas stuff is a bit more kind of fragmented. Hampton Road is probably the most complete show that we do have out of the 10 that were filmed. I don't think we've got anywhere close to a full Vegas show.
Okay.
There's a good chunk that's missing. When I started this project, going through this footage, I didn't know what I didn't know, because a lot of the camera notes from the original production are no longer around. So there was no clear record of exactly what they shot. So I didn't know what I was missing until I kind of worked out, well, why am I missing this? Or why have I only got one camera for this instead of the 5 that I should have, or whatever. And I was able to kind of piece together kind of a clearer idea of what I'm technically missing, what's not in the archive.
Okay.
And some of that footage is in private collectors' hands. Some of it's probably sitting in someone's garage, forgotten. Who knows? Lots of people on Elvis projects have sticky fingers over the years, and lots of people have had access to this footage. It's changed hands.
One of the ones that came out quite a few years ago, Lost Performances, where it was stuff that was not used in That's the Way It Is. Is there a project sitting there in the future of stuff, something in that similar style of redoing sort of the lost performances in a more clean way?
Possibly. I think kind of Baz, I know he's mentioned it himself publicly. So I think kind of a full Hampton Road show is probably the most likely to happen, because it's often cited as kind of the holy grail for Elvis fans to see a whole show from beginning to end without interruption. And I think what I find interesting when I've kind of put together a good chunk of Hampton Road, and no one's probably seen that since the audience at the show back in 1972. Even the filmmakers back in 1972 wouldn't have put this together as an entire run because they just would not have. It would have been so much labor, and they knew they were going to use that song from Hampton Road, this song from San Antonio, and blah blah blah. So they wouldn't have cut the whole concert together back then. So no one's seen it since the audience. So I find that kind of quite interesting, quite compelling.
In the original movies, and That's the Way It Is, and a little bit on Elvis on Tour, there was a lot of fan footage. The 59 hours that you guys are indicating, is that strictly Elvis, or is that some of that same material as well?
And some of the same material as well. Yeah.
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 Yeah, because
they did very much focus on Elvis when they were shooting the shows. All 5 cameras were pointed at Elvis. They didn't shoot any audience. So that was just kind of a secondary shoot, so to speak.
Right.
And occasionally you see Elvis in the background and he's wearing something else. But yeah.
Okay. Now, when we see the glimpse of this footage today, 50 years later, I think to myself, I had to hear somebody talk about, fans talking, and That's the Way It Is. I mean, at the time, and we've had That's the Way It Is forever, and everybody loves that movie. But you're, hearing somebody talk about being an Elvis fan, and maybe that's the concept of that movie. But it just seems a shame that there was so much more that you guys have now found that, oh my gosh, why didn't they add more into those movies? But it's hindsight, I guess.
I mean, I love That's the Way It Is. And I love what they did in the special edition, where they took out all those fan interviews and put in more music. So
Yeah.
I think both those films and Elvis on Tour, they're terrific films for what they were.
Yeah.
But kind of, I think in a few years' time, when some of the stuff that we didn't include comes out, or you see that, you go, why
Right.
didn't they put that in EPiC? And
Right.
you always have to make choices.
Yeah.
And we want this to, we could have made a 3-hour film, but we want this to be in the cinema. And a 3-hour music concert film is not going to go into the cinema. No one's going to see that. So we unfortunately had to make some hard choices, and I was gutted by some of the choices we did have to make. But that's just the way it is sometimes.
Jonathan, I promised some of our fans that obviously wanted to get some questions in. If you have a few more minutes, I'd like to ask you a few that they had provided.
Okay.
So Crystal asked, the footage of Elvis playing guitar at the International is one of her favorites of the movie. Was there more of that footage available, or was that more or less used in EPiC?
Little Sister?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a story about that. It's one of my favorites in the entire film as well. And I tortured the poor people at Warner Brothers for a good solid 2 years looking for that footage, because that was part of the footage that I mentioned was missing, and it remains missing. I found an edited work print. A work print is, back in the 70s when they shot film, you'd shoot the original film, and then that original camera negative, they make a copy of that, and they give the copy to the editor, who then chops it up and does whatever they want to do with it. And the original negative is never touched until the very end, where you go in and cut it. So I found a work print, an edited work print. So it's just really fragments of film where all the good shots have been taken out and put somewhere. I couldn't find those either. So I had just scraps of Little Sister, and I was just obsessed with the song. I really wanted to use it, but it becomes so faded. It turned magenta, turned purple. All the colors
Yeah.
being taken out, which happens with work print. And yeah, fortunately, there was enough there that I was able to do something with it and cut it together. You know, is it the best cut I've ever done? Absolutely not, because all good shots were taken out and missing.
Mm.
But I just loved the track so much, and luckily Peter Jackson's, as part of his restoration process, was able to restore as much color in there as possible. You will notice that it looks slightly different to the other film. It's a bit more orange. So it's not quite as good, but it still looks, you know, in my rough cut, I had turned it black and white. So at one point, it was going to be black and white in the film, but Peter Jackson company was able to restore the color. But that sit down where you're sitting down on a stool, kind of playing guitar, he was, I think, a bit of Love Me, I think, is in the film as well. I didn't have the full song; I only had a bit of it, which is why I used part of Elvis on tour there as well. And Are You Lonesome Tonight? We had that, and that looks amazing. That's from that sit down guitar session as well. But there's a lot missing, and we used as much of it as possible. But yeah, I love that particular sequence.
You know, the things that you're mentioning about that, to the eye of the viewer, obviously you're the editor, so you know, you just gave away secrets, because I wouldn't have known that,
Oh,
you know, it
no,
was off at all.
Warner Brothers went into the salt mines multiple times looking for Little Sister, because I'd ring them up every week going, "Have you found it yet? Have you found it yet? Have you found it yet?" And unfortunately, you know, they're opening boxes completely unrelated to Elvis, looking for Little Sister. And yeah, they tried.
Because afterwards he rarely used his guitar other than the opening. He never did the sit downs after that.
Yeah, it's the only time he did it in the 10 shows they filmed. So yeah,
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, there you go.
we got enough of it. Yeah.
Barbara, she's from Austria. She asked, epic moments are the ones that stay in people's minds forever. Which moment in Elvis Presley's career do you feel best captured the truly epic impact? Was it the one that you just talked about, or was there another scene? Basically, what she's saying is, you know, what captured Elvis the most in that movie of epic?
For me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I you know, whenever people ask what's your favorite Elvis song, it's almost the same question really, and I always find it kind of almost impossible to ask, because you know, kind of this he had so many different kind of careers and comebacks, and I find it very hard to find one particular moment. But I think you know, out of my, yeah, again, I almost find it impossible to answer that. A couple of things I did love though. I love Poke Salad Annie. You know, just his visceral energy is infectious. Um, you've lost that loving feeling. I particularly love that performance that we used. I think, you know, kind of, I'm always in awe of just the small little movements he does. Um, you know, I kind of go, how did he ever think of that? And it kind of blows my mind. The spiritual power of some of his gospel music, "How Great Thou Art," I think is one of my favorite songs in the film. Um, and again, you know, it was one of the very first things I did, kind of way back when, along with Poke Salad Annie. I kind of went, I found this "How Great Thou Art" that's never been used before in anything, including gospel performances, and I went, this is so powerful. So I love that. Uh, Suspicious Minds is always, you know, a favorite.
I think what you're saying is the entirety of what you put together really is all epic.
Well, yeah, totally. I mean, I did have the power to put things in, and and I did try to make sure that everything was epic in its own little way.
One of the main reasons I wanted to watch Moulin Rouge again is because I forgot what the imagery was like of the titles and stuff like that. Was that a Baz style, right? And then with the Elvis movie in 2022, and with the current EPiC movie, there is a very bright graphic look. And when I saw this belt, I'm going, could this have been the inspiration for Baz, or did that come from somewhere else? The black and the gold and the red.
Oh no, it's all from Elvis. In fact, it had a name, EDA, Elvis Decorative Aesthetic, and Baz insisted that all the graphics, even the end scroll at the end, had this kind of Elvis decorative aesthetic. And I'm talking about the Elvis movie, and then of course that kind of continued through to EPiC. And it all came from Elvis, really. His jewelry, his belts, some of his jumpsuits. I mean, there's quite a few close-ups in EPiC where you actually see his rings and how blinged out he was, all
Right.
the time. His glasses. So it was all inspired by Elvis.
Yeah. Just with that belt part, did you add the little audio of the chain sound and the foot tapping? Is that what I assume there was no audio, so that would have been something that you would have brought into the film?
Our sound team did that, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's brilliant, to be honest, because you just feel it. You can feel Elvis's tension going on. You could, so yeah, very good idea on that. Well, then with Tanya's, what was the most rewarding experience that you've had with EPiC?
Absolutely, meeting people like you guys and going to Graceland, and hearing people's kind of reaction. One of the slightly unusual things about making this film is that the first time I got any kind of external feedback from an audience was when we showed it at Toronto at the film festival in front of an audience. Usually with Hollywood films or studio films, they insist that you do previews, while you're still cutting the film. They make you put the film in front of an audience and they score it, and you find out what audience is like, what they're confused by, what they don't like, and you recut the film accordingly. On this film, it was different. So it was slightly terrifying. We didn't know, was anyone going to like it? And fortunately they did. But kind of having played this film at Graceland, where I met you, Rob, we also played it at the old International Hotel, now the Westgate Hotel, in Vegas, which was quite surreal. Playing this film in the very showroom where Elvis used to play, in front of an audience was pretty cool. But hearing kind of old feedback from Elvis fans, new fans as well, the younger generation, and also people who, as I mentioned earlier on, who maybe didn't think much of Elvis or didn't know anything about him, are now going, okay, now I get it. And that was very much kind of what we set out to do, is to try and change some minds. And yeah, that's been kind of really rewarding.
Were you at the Vegas international performance viewing?
I was, yeah. It was terrifying because I had to, say a few words at the beginning. It was the longest walk of my life, was walking across that stage in front of 950 people. It was terrifying. Not
I'll share a real quick personal story with you. So in 1975, I saw Elvis Presley in that showroom. I snuck in a tape recorder. I have an audio recording that I did of that performance. And I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was there for a tour with Joe Esposito. He would host these tours. And I was able to stand in the same spot where I was 50 years ago and listen to my audio in that room.
That's so cool.
So that was pretty cool. But
yeah.
My last technical question for you, and I want to get this before we go, is what's your whole take on AI today? Because I know Baz and yourself have specifically said there wasn't 1 ounce of AI used in this film. As directors and producers and people in the film industry, what's your take on AI going forward in your industry?
I think AI can be a really kind of interesting, exciting tool. I think, as filmmakers, we need to embrace it to a certain extent and use it to, kind of, a lot of what we do is very labor intensive, and AI can kind of cut down, make kind of very labor intensive things much easier and quicker. AI is already being used a lot in music production to kind of take a pretty poor recording and just remove banal stuff like removing crackle from a recording, or a hum or a hiss. Kind of the most basic tools in Final Cut Pro or Premiere do that. There's a button you click and uses AI to take out. I think that's amazing. It really is. Is it something a sound engineer could do after twiddling knobs for a week? Absolutely. But be able to kind of use AI to remove the labor and burden of that kind of stuff is incredible and is unstoppable. I mean, you're not going to be able to avoid that. I've seen some super cool stuff in terms of visualizing backgrounds or storyboards and stuff like that. I think it's a really interesting tool for a director to be able to use for storyboards and stuff like that. Visual effects, there's some incredible visual effects shortcuts that you use with AI. In terms of replacing actors, I'm not so sure about that. I like what happens when you get a good script and you get a good actor with a good director. And again, it's one of those things, 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5. Kind of people working in a creative way. There's this magic there that happy accidents happen all the time. And I don't think AI is going to kind of replace that. But in terms of more technical aspects of making art, I think there's definitely some value to be had, but not at the expense of creativity and art.
Well, that was done at the Sphere with Wizard of Oz. I would imagine with the footprint of the Sphere angle of whatever degree it is, that they had to fill stuff with stuff that wasn't part of the movie.
I haven't seen the Wizard of Oz yet. Sphere. I saw little clips of it at Warner Brothers because they made it for the Sphere. And part of it was kind of no-brainer. If there's a big wide shot of Dorothy and this big sky above the head, they extended the sky up into the surrounds and in the dome.
Right.
The Yellow Brick Road probably going up and beyond. I'm not too sure, but I mean, Baz is slightly kind of tickled pink by the idea of this film playing in the Sphere, but I don't know how we'd do that.
The footage of EPiC, is that Sphere capable on a viewable perspective?
I'm not too sure how it would look. Obviously, we couldn't have Elvis's head, kind of up there
Right.
So I'm not too sure kind of how we'd fill in the rest of the space.
Yeah. I was just curious how that is.
Yeah, no,
I think,
I'm curious as well. I know Baz is curious because it's been mentioned to him. He's gone, oh, well, maybe we do that, but
mhm,
how? I'm not too sure.
yeah.
But it's something I think we probably will look into
Okay.
as long as, it doesn't kind of ruin the experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for our audience that be watching this, as you said, it's returning to IMAX, and that would be the optimum place to watch EPiC and the movie again before it's no longer in theaters. So um, that's definitely the best platform for that presentation.
Indeed, it's certainly the most immersive experience, and you can be guaranteed the sound's going to be played loud, and it's going to be on a big screen, and you know it works well in IMAX. It's great. In fact.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jonathan. Appreciate the technical aspect, your dedication to this movie, you and Baz and the team. The soundtrack's doing quite well. The music's fits. It's a music concert, and I never saw Elvis, but I sure felt like I went there, and that's why I've gone multiple times. You really immersed the fans, and Jonathan, we appreciate that.
And I'm looking forward to not this March, but the following March for the Oscars, because there's some Oscar-worthy stuff in here from not just being an Elvis fan, but watching the cut of that film. Hats off to you guys.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's some
thank you so
awards
much
for
for
you
that.
guys in the future.
Who knows? But I think Oscar is going to be a bit of a stretch, but yeah, but who knows?
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much again. Bruno, thank you for joining me and helping out with the conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, Bruno.